Hello, hello again.
Oh no, we're back to this now.
Oh, that's terrible.
Go
We
ahead.
got 2 lives going, so
This hasn't happened for so
the
long.
other one there got frozen up. But hello, the one that is live is the Self-Healing Support Group. So good evening, everyone. We had a great week in the group, a lot of great questions, and today we missed Self-Healing Saturday because we've been doing lives every day, so it's kind of gotten to be a lot. But today we wanted to get one in and do self-healing specifically in talking about letting go of worry. There's a really there's a really great question that someone posted about. Oh, sorry.
I think you might have.
I messed it up
That's
again.
too much of a drastic movement.
That somebody posted about worrying about her kids and how she realizes that worry doesn't serve her and that it's kind of keeping her in a pattern, but she can't overcome the urge to worry about her kids because she kind of just feels like that's just part of being a mother, part of being a parent. And we wanted to give you guys some tools, some different ways to think about worrying about specifically your kids, but anybody that you care about, because worry is... Everyone does it, and there's some part of us that almost feels like it's the right thing to do, like it's the responsible thing to do, almost as though you're not a good parent if you don't worry about your kids. I feel like a lot of times it's almost implied is that worry is just a part of this thing. I mean, even the fact that we know that a nest worry conflict so profoundly affects a mother, that it causes physical changes on the tissue level, because that worry, it's communicating something to these deeper subconscious, unconscious, like ancient parts of your body for you to be profoundly worried about someone that you care about, even a pet, someone that you just love so much and you want so much for their well-being is so important to you. But realizing the connection between your thought process, between this being an ongoing thing that is unsettling to you, if you regularly find yourself unsettled by thinking, by worrying, by just, concerning yourself with the well-being of somebody else, you've got to realize that there is, that may not necessarily be serving you on every level of who you are. And different ways of thinking about it can be very, very helpful to kind of make sense out of not doing this thing that is so compelling to do.
So, but anytime where I'm having an experience, and let's say it's an experience that I don't like, worry, anxiety, anger, frustration, whatever. In general, I go up to the big picture and I say, anytime I'm having some experience, whether it's positive, whether it's negative, whether it's intense, whether it's just kind of average every day, it's always possible for me to be having an experience that's different than the one that I'm having in a given moment in time. And so, like, obviously, I'm not a mother, right? So I can't, it's very easy to say, well, what the hell does he know about? He's never had children before, and that's actually true. I don't have kids, and so I do not know what it's like to have kids. And so I know the Kung Fu Panda is here. This is a good...
Oh my goodness, hello, thank you. Thank you.
It sprouts right off the top of it. It reminds me of Mario. The second Mario. The little
those
turnips.
things you pull out of the ground.
Yeah. So I don't know what it's like to have kids. You know what I'm saying? I've never had that experience. I don't claim to have that experience. The last thing that I would do, in fact, I do this with everyone. I would never tell anyone that they shouldn't have some experience, that some experience they're having is not legitimate, or that it's silly, or that it's unnecessary, or that it's your fault, or whatever. It's just like your experience belongs to you, and I feel like the experience that you're creating always makes sense given the kind of gestalt or the totality of the stuff that's going on in your life at a given time. The one caveat that I would add in, and this doesn't apply to necessarily only to mothers, this applies to conscious beings, this applies to creators of experience. It's always possible to create an experience that is different, that is better than the one that you are creating now. It's always possible to create an experience that's different and that is better than any experience that you've ever created before. And I'm fairly adamant about that because it's such a general thing, and it's one of those things that you're kind of invited to embrace at any time. And I think that for me, when I'm allowed to step back and I'm allowed to have the experience that I'm having right now, I'm worried about this, that, the other thing, I'm really concerned, I'm deeply, I feel, it feels so right to feel this way that I don't want to feel. Sometimes it feels right to feel bad, right? But I don't necessarily want to keep going that way because it feels bad. If I'm allowed to have that experience, like, you're worried because, you love your kids. It's an easy thing to do, to worry about them. But you recognize that it's not serving you, or you recognize that it's not helping. And so you've kind of, within you is this inspiration or this desire to say, gosh, I want to keep loving my children, but I think I'd like to find a new way of experiencing my love for my children. I think it would be really nice if I could create a new and different and positive and more empowering, more resourceful, more productive, more fulfilling, less kind of edgy, experience of my love for these kids. And I think that's absolutely possible. I feel like it's your right. I feel like it's your kind of creative prerogative. And I think that it's a really wonderful thing that you've recognized that this thing that you're doing really isn't serving you. And I think first and foremost, learning to distinguish between, and this isn't obvious when you say it, but so many things do, and so many things that are unstated or unconscious or preconscious, things that we can do in the back of our mind when the light of awareness hits them, when we articulate them, it's like, oh, yeah, I've been doing that, doesn't make any sense. We can conflate or mistake for one thing our love for our kids and worry about them, or our love for anyone and worry, or our enthusiasm or desire for something and worry about not getting it. And I think it's important to emphasize that there is no point of love for a person at which it becomes inevitable that you worry about bad things happening to that person. Because one of the things about negative emotion, fear, anxiety, all that stuff, is that it comes from focusing your mind on what you do not want, on trying to avoid or move away from things that you do not want to have happen. And when you focus your mind on that stuff, you tend to feel in a way that's consistent with it. And there's no point of love for another person at which you are obligated, sort of in principle, to start focusing your mind on what you do not want. So Melissa, I love you so much that I'm going to think about you cheating on me, or thinking about you getting into a car accident, or thinking about bad things happening to you, because if I didn't focus on those things, I really wouldn't love you 10 out of 10. I can love you 9 out of 10 and just enjoy my love for you and focus on good things happening to you. But, there's a point where, and we're 10 out of 10, so we're really committed here. I have to start creating negative experiences in myself now. And I think it's one of those things where, and so much of what we see growing up, what's modeled for us, what we see in movies, what we've encountered from those either semi or actually abusive relationships in our life, or just maybe dysfunctional relationships, suggests that, gosh, if you really love people enough, you start doing really weird and unresourceful stuff. If you really, really love them, you kind of do stupid things or things that don't make sense. It's just it's an expression of the love that you have for them. I don't know if that's the case for the person who answered that or asked that question necessarily, but for a lot of people, it tends to be that way. There's this kind of like fuzzy area where it's like, I love that person so much, I have to sit around and make pictures of bad things happening to them, or worrying that they'll make a bad choice. I have to do all those different things. And I think that beginning to imagine a space between your love for that person on the one hand and directing your consciousness, directing your mind in areas that cause you to feel bad and to create experiences for yourself that you really aren't enjoying, remembering that those are separate things totally. That anytime you, not as a mom, but as just a human being, as a conscious creature, anytime you give your attention to what you don't want, whether it's having bills be late, or whether it's being late for a meeting, or whether it's, a health concern, or whether it's about your children, or about what your husband's up to, or about what your wife's up to, or whatever, anytime you focus on what you do not want, you're going to feel negative emotion. To the degree that that area of life is important to you, that negative emotion will be more and less intense, and to the degree that what you're focusing on is not what you want, right? Like worrying about your child stubbing their toe versus worrying about them getting kicked out of college versus worry about them getting into some kind of an altercation where they're in physical danger. Those are obviously different things. They elicit from you different emotions. What's the common theme, though? The common theme is that you're focusing on stuff that's not serving you. You're giving your attention to what you don't want. The reason that's happening is that it's going on kind of unconsciously, unintentionally. I think it's probably useful to acknowledge that we've had modeled for us very often, when stuff matters to you, you worry about it. When you get a new car and you love it a lot, and you just love this new thing, you worry about bad things happening to it. When you make a lot of money, or you get a lot of money you weren't expecting, you worry about losing it. When you get in a new relationship, you worry about losing that person. When you have children, my God, this is just literally the essence of you. This is like your lineage, your legacy. It's the most important thing ever for most people. Of course you worry about that, because they're the most valuable thing you'll ever have. And I think as long as that unspoken relationship between love and unresourceful focusing exists, to the degree that you love your kids, or you love whoever or whatever, you will tend to, not that you have to, but you will tend to naturally focus your mind on what you don't want. And to the degree that you do that, you'll create experiences that don't serve you and that don't serve them. If you can depersonalize that tendency to focus your mind on what you don't want, if you can recognize that you really do love your kids, absolutely you love your kids, it's just that the worry has nothing to do with it. You don't love them less because you say, listen, when I sit around and think about bad things happening to my kids, there's a sense in which that has nothing to do with my kids. That's just me not really resourcefully directing my mind. And when you recognize that, you can be simultaneously a good mom, the good mom that you are, and a happy person who learns kind of by degrees, very patiently with yourself, taking it easy, because you are a mom. That's a part of who you are. It's not all of who you are, but it's a major part of who you are. You're also a person. You're also an individual who can develop the ability to kind of consciously and intentionally direct your focus. And to the degree that you learn how to do that, you'll learn how to create experiences of loving your kids that are positive for you, exclusively positive for you. Because I guarantee you, you don't let your worry for your kids get in their way, impede their happiness. You just let it get in your way and impede your happiness. But when you are able to enjoy being with your kids, knowing what they're doing, having fun, but then also when they go off on their own, to whatever degree they do that, depending on their age, enjoy that too. It's kind of like a reassertion almost of your personhood. It's like, yes, I'm a mom, and I'm a mom who actually knows how to deliberately focus her mind. And it's kind of like, it's a useful thing, I think, because when you recognize, it's more intense maybe for a mother because of that bond that exists between mother and child, but the pattern level principle is the same. When a person focuses their mind on what they do not want, they tend to feel bad. They tend to experience negative emotion.
Yeah, for me, not all that long ago, I don't know what it was, out of nowhere, I literally started worrying about everyone in my family, and it was just a terrible sensation. And I had to text them. I called everybody. It was, and at some point I kind of came online, and I was like, what is going on here? What am I doing? And to realize what that sensation of worry, what is it made out of? It's negative imagination. It's me imagining horrible things happening to these people that I care about. And so the moment I became aware that I was doing that, I switched it, because worry, nothing about worry is productive. Nothing about worry is protecting those people. But I know that my imagination, and sometimes you can even kind of freak yourself out if you're into law of attraction and you're into conscious creation, and you're like, oh no, I just imagined this horrible thing happening, and you just want to erase that you thought it, because then you kind of freak yourself out that it's going to happen because you thought about it. Just kind of let everything settle down there for a second, and then start positively imagining. So whatever the opposite of worry is, this creative imagination is so powerful that you can imagine wonderful, absolutely excellent things happening for these people, and all of a sudden you feel so much better. And to realize that is such a better use of your resources. In those moments when I was worrying, I just didn't have access to that full bigger picture. I was just kind of immersed in my experience, having this, and for me it's one of those deeply ingrained things. I watched my mother worry about literally everything. I mean, the way I experienced her was as though if she didn't worry, the world wouldn't go on. If she didn't sit on the couch and just rock back and forth with just this immense burden of worry for money, for the world, for her kids, for her family, for all of this stuff that was going on. And so, what she probably wanted that to impress upon me was how much she loved me, but really what it impressed upon me was how important it is to worry. And when you think about what you're modeling for your children, and when you think about how when you are worrying, here you've got these kids that you're getting out into the world, do you want them to have that experience? If you are actively having an experience that you don't want your children to have, because I don't think parents really want that. You don't want your kids to be worried about you in the same way you're worried about them, do you? I mean, not really. You think, oh, well, it's a different thing. But your children will model the experiences that you have, not necessarily what you tell them, because that was one of the things for us when it came to money. It was like, oh, don't worry about money. God's in control. Don't worry about anything. God's in control. But then so those are the words that were transmitted. That was the explicit instruction, but the implicit instruction, the unspoken modeling, what I saw, that's so much more of a powerful teacher than what you actually say to your children is what you're actually doing. And so if you find yourself kind of embroiled in some emotions that you don't want to basically pass on to your kids, I mean, think about what would be a more resourceful way. And plus, when I'm worried, I don't have access to all of my resources. I make bad decisions when I'm worried. I don't think clearly when I'm worried. I'm not, making plans in a good way. I'm just kind of taking all of my psychic energy and focusing it in a way that doesn't feel good to me. And so at whatever point in that process that you become aware, find out what it's made out of. Slow it down. Hi, Lucina. Slow it down the process and say, what exactly am I doing? I am making pictures, or I am saying things to myself, or I am, remembering this one time that something really bad happened. And see if you can start using a positive imagination. Start thinking about really great things happening. I mean, the closest approximation I have to that, apart from my sister, because she's like my baby, but
I think she's here, Jan.
I know, I think she's watching. Hello, Paley. Is our dog, and when he gets hurt, I mean, like when he was a little baby puppy and he swallowed the squeaker and I was just, beside myself.
I think I have to interject here because anytime we use the dog as an example, I think that to other people it might seem ridiculous. Oh, that's nothing compared. But I at the same time, I don't think perhaps you don't understand our relationship to this to our dog. It's a funny amount of intuitiveness, right? Yeah. So this dog's like definitely a part of the family.
Yeah, and he he hurt his little toenail the other day. And then again, like, what do you think about? Oh, what worse thing could be going on? What, maybe it's not just the toenail, maybe it's this, and you can it's a snowball effect. When you start worrying about one thing, it's inevitable that you're going to start worrying about more and more and more things. But when you just start to kind of gather your resources, take a second and imagine positively. Imagine, okay, so instead of, when I think about what I don't want, when I'm worrying, I feel bad. I don't have access to all my resources. I'm modeling a state of being that I don't want my kids to experience for themselves. So is there a way for me to imagine in a positive way for whatever outcome I would like to have happen, Mm-hmm. And so even just in that ability to make that switch, it's a very powerful signal to your subconscious mind, because then you're feeling good. You're not on alert, because that's the thing, is when your body senses that there is danger, there's a threat, and the greater the danger, the greater the intensity, the more your body is like, okay, well, here we are. We're listening to you. Remember, your cells, your body, your subconscious mind is listening to everything that is going on in your experience. And the more sudden, the more intense it is. I mean, especially if you get shocking news, you know what I mean? Because what can you do about shocking news except for, react to it however is most natural for you in that moment.
And think about that too, is that like if you're primed, if you're scanning and your worry apparatus is in place, what constitutes shocking news can be, a knock at the door. Oh my God, what's going? There's a phone ringing, and you're really upset and worried that that's your child. Someone, your child's in trouble, and that's news about what that is. Isn't that interesting how you can sensitize yourself to that stuff? And I think that like one of those things is that when you were talking about the realizing the transmission, that we're transmitting experience to each other, that's a very kind of sneaky thing, because I really think that as kids, because I once was a child myself and I had this experience, I think that we are like we absorb everything about the experiences that our parents were having predominantly around us, the strongest ones, the most intense ones, especially the negative ones that they had around us when we were growing up, and we replicate within ourselves those experiences without even realize what we're doing. And what's really interesting about this is, like when a person generally reaches a certain age, it's usually like in their 30s or perhaps their 40s, they say something and they say, oh my God, that's my mom. Oh my God, that's my dad. I've become whoever that is. And I think the reason for that is that you're not listening to what your parents are telling you. It's like, your parents tell you to do things and you say, oh, to hell with that, I'm going to do things that way. What you don't realize, though, is that we become our parents because we model that internal experience in stepwise degrees without even realizing that we're doing it. And I mean, I, for example, have noticed patterns of procrastination, patterns of settling, patterns of just kind of grumping around and just kind of being like a dick, just kind of being an asshole. Do you know what I'm saying? saying like, and I'm complaining about stuff that I don't even really care about. That's not me. That's not me. Somewhere along the way, I picked up a pattern of this, like, what it's like to be me, grumpy, just negative, just kind of like, and you just look around and find something to complain about, and you bluster about it. And to the degree that I recognize, wait, this isn't even, I don't even care about this. Like, why am I being such a jerk? Really, I'm not trying to be a good guy. This just isn't me. I just don't care about this. Why am I pretending like I do? You know what I mean? And what's interesting is that you can watch from those states as you start to talk. You start to say the same stuff that whoever it was that influenced you when you were growing up. And I think that to the degree that you recognize that you are truly passing on your experience, and so your relationship to your kids, I would say try to have an experience of parenthood that you would want your children to have if they go on to have children themselves. How do you want your kids to feel when their kids go off to school? How do you want your kids to feel when their kids go off to a dance, when their kids go off to college, when their kids get their car for the first time? You'd want your kids to have a really lovely experience of those things. You would want your children to be able to enjoy parenthood. And I really think that if you want your kids to enjoy this stuff, you've got to find a way to enjoy it yourself, because they're taking their cues from you, and you don't know that they're doing it, and they don't know that they're doing it, but they're smarter than you think they are, and they're smarter than they realize they are, and they're absorbing all of this stuff, the other than conscious aspects of themselves. I mean, you're giving them a model, a template, right, for how to not only live life, but how to experience themselves, how to experience and relate to reality. And I think that for a lot of parents, because your love for your kids gets you into this mess, in a sense. You love them so much that you make sense out of doing a lot of unresourceful stuff, but your love for them can get you out of this mess too if you say, listen, I love my kids enough to worry about them. Do I love my kids enough to figure out a way to love them in a positive and fulfilling and enriching way, so that I can kind of unconsciously transmit the ability to relate to this magnitude of love to them, so that when they love their children as much as I love them, they can have a really resourceful and empowering and positive experience. Nobody thinks about that, because that's kind of further down the line, I think, than most people think about. But when you can kind of leverage those parental instincts, and you can harness them, and you can direct them in the direction of saying, part of being a successful parent is enjoying parenting, so that I provide my kids with a model, with a template, with permission is a huge thing, with permission to enjoy being parents. And when you recognize too that when you are enjoying yourself, you're the whole of who you are. You have the capacity to access all of those resources that are perhaps laying dormant within you right now. Your capacity to influence your children is tremendously magnified when you are in a positive and in a resourceful state. I've actually I can see you soften when you're around your mom, and your mom's in a really resourceful mode, right? Sometimes when we would be going to a gathering or something like that, there would almost be kind of from you an anticipation that we don't know what's going to be going on there, right? But then when you come into contact with her and she's in this, just lovely, right? Good mood, everything's really great. There's this receptivity, this relaxation. You let your guard down, you know what I mean? And so even if there are things practically that you need to relate to your kids, I mean, I think the way to do it is to get yourself feeling good, to model to them, because you all of a sudden become a trustworthy person, because what are you? You're a person who is really consciously cultivating an experience. That's someone that we want to pay attention to. And I think that, like, the little psychologist in our mind says, that's a person who knows what's what. That's a person who's worth paying attention to. And then the other thing I was thinking about here is that when you think a thought about something happening to your kids or whatever, and you get this negative feeling, the thing is we think that there's a reason that we think that stuff. I wouldn't have thought that if it wasn't kind of true. We have this almost kind of like superstitious thing. You just think the stuff you do. You don't think it because it's true. You can create an experience of it being true by kind of focusing on it and perseverating on it. But just because you have a thought doesn't mean it's true. Just because you have a feeling doesn't mean it's true. If you're super worried about your kids, it's not that feeling isn't telling you what's going to happen. That feeling is telling you what has been happening in your mind. You've been kind of focusing on things you're worried about. And when you recognize that that's all that bad feeling means. So sometimes, let's say, for example, I am not paying attention to what I'm thinking. I'm not looking at what I'm thinking about, right? I'm not watching my mind. My mind's kind of off doing its own thing. And I kind of stumble into a pattern of unresourceful thought. I say, what if that thing happened? Okay, well, then, what if this thing happened? Oh, man, what if they get upset about that? And then I think, remember that time when I was 5 and I did that embarrassing thing? And it just kind of cascades. And all of a sudden I can build within myself this kind of ball of anxiety and just trepidation. And kind of like, sometimes for me, it's almost like what is it? It's a foreboding. It's this ominous kind of. There's a word that I can't quite find. I used it recently. just an impending doom kind of feeling that I get out of nowhere for no reason whatsoever. And if I feel that feeling and I say, that means something bad's about to happen, that means that I'm in trouble, that means that there's something I haven't remembered, there's something I haven't done, there's something that the house is going to burn down, there's something really important that I haven't done. If I decide that's what that means, I'm going to keep thinking things that make that feel realer and realer and realer and perpetuate that negative experience. If I feel that negative experience and I say, shit, I've been thinking about some stuff that I don't want, I need to watch what I'm thinking. It's time for me to start thinking things that enrich what it's like to be me, or things that at least don't make me feel freaked out. That's different because it positions you to respond resourcefully to that negative experience instead of saying, oh, a really bad negative experience, let me think more things that'll kind of perpetuate that experience.
Well, I feel like, too, a lot of people may ask about, like, well, what about, like, intuition or mother's instinct or some kind of just, like, some deep inner knowing that, like, something's going on. And I think that's different than worry. I feel like maybe one time that served someone, or, like, they had a thought, or, you know, and they probably manifested the experience in some way because they were thinking about it so much. But it happened one time. One parent did it at one point, and then it became like, oh, you know, this instinct, this kind of underlying worry, you can head off at the past, some bad thing happening, if you're really tuned into like this intuition. And people, I feel like it's kind of gotten perverted to the point where we think that means persistent, ongoing worry, thinking bad things are going to happen. And I feel like that's how you kind of get into that helicopter parent mode where you're just like, I know something bad's going to happen, and I need to be there. Like I need to be there because, and that really, I mean, I do think that may set up some kind of undermining of trust in your children and creating in them that kind of anti-fragile ability to respond because you're always there to respond for them, kind of thing. So I think that's what would you say about like the intuition, kind of mother's instinct versus persistent worry? Like, do you just, you know, not silence that completely? But I think that would still...
They're separate things.
Yeah.
It's the different... To me, it's the difference between, like... I get these friend requests sometimes from these made-up accounts, and it's like they're always like half-naked women, you know, who have like a tremendous amount of makeup on, and their profile links to some website that's got like, you know, really gross stuff in the name of it, and it's like, that's obviously a fake profile, right? This is obviously a fake thought. This is obvious. If I accept all those friend requests, before you know it, my whole friend thing is going to be filled up with fake people who aren't real, and I think you got to keep those channels clear. I think mother's intuition is a really real thing. I think intuition in general is a real thing, but I think you have to keep yourself in a positive, resourceful state so that you can be receptive to that stuff. It never requires you to sit around and think. I mean, no one ever fired up their intuition by scan. The whole point of intuition, in fact, is to prevent you having to scan for problems, because you just go about your business. You just, you know,
something comes to you.
You have to let your finger. It's like if you're communicating with what are those, like radios? What's the name of those? You know, those radios where you push the button and you talk and you say over and you let go of the button. You have to let go of that button. And for me, worrying, thinking those negative, unresourceful thoughts, is like that holding that button down thing. Is everything okay? Is everything okay? Is everything okay? Is everything okay? You never let off the button for the other side and say, oh yeah, everything's fine. We'll let you know if anything changes. And like you have to recognize that there's the you that you experience yourself to be, right? That's a part of the whole of who you are. But there's more to the whole of who you are than the you that you experience yourself to be. And it's so important that the you that you experience yourself to be allow the rest of the whole of who you are to do its job. The job of the you that you experience yourself to be is to focus your mind on what you want and to keep yourself feeling good. Because when you're keeping yourself feeling good, you're open to receiving information, you're open to processing information, you're feeling good, which is important, you make good quality decisions, you're relaxed, and so you're looking around, you know what I'm saying? You're paying attention to what's actually happening, you're not worrying about what could happen. You know, that's that thing, is that it's so easy reality provides us with so much beautiful information that we need to respond resourcefully to it. But when we allow ourselves to worry about all of the bad realities that could come to be, we neglect what actually is, and therefore we miss opportunities to respond resourcefully to it. I think that learning to trust, learning to feel good, keep that channel open. Because I know that in the past I've been in some situations where like something bad was about to happen, I was feeling good, and my demeanor suddenly changed. And I didn't go from feeling good to feeling bad. I went from feeling good to saying, oh, this is interesting. I think I need to go over here. Do you know what I'm saying? It was like, I need to take a few steps this way. I need to kind of extricate myself from the situation. And that wasn't something that I had to think negative thoughts to get to. I was just kind of doing my thing. And, it's almost as if I feel like I need to stare at the phone to make it ring. Do you know what I'm saying? The phone rings when someone calls. I mean, when intuition calls, you hear it. Unless you've got the radio turned up so loud and all this worry and all this static and all this stuff, or if you keep picking up the phone to see if there's anyone there, I mean, then if your intuition calls, it's not going to be able to get through to you. Do you know what I'm saying? Because you're picking up the phone, worrying about stuff, you're clogging up those lines. Be relaxed, be receptive, have fun. And I think, too, there's this thing about just responding resourcefully to stuff, that if something is to happen, in your life that you're, whether your kid's getting in a little bit of trouble or, something goes some way you don't want it to, money situation, whatever, in general, you have to populate your personal history with experiences of responding resourcefully to stuff. Seeing something, saying, oh, shit, that's the way it is, isn't it? Okay, given this, what do I want? And you create a positive experience of an unfortunate or a negative situation there. When you do that a certain number of times, you just get comfortable with the idea of doing that. And you don't worry about things going wrong anymore, because that little voice says, oh, but what about if this happens? You say, well, then we'll respond resourcefully to it. Well, then we'll see what we can do and we'll do it. And when you have an answer for that little nagging voice that says, well, what about this? And oh, what if they? And what if he? And what if this happens? And all this stuff. Well, we'll look at it and we'll say, okay. And then we'll say, given this, what do we want? It allows you to exist comfortably here in this now moment. It allows you to be at home here. Do you know what I mean? Rather than saying, well, now is great, but what about the next now? What about that? If you'll just respond resourcefully to this now, if you will respond resourcefully to the fact that you tend to worry about things when you don't need to, when something happens that you would have worried about if you knew it was going to happen, you'll be in a position to respond resourcefully to that too. You know what I mean? You just have to learn to kind of interface with the reality that's right here so that you become confident in your ability to do that. I think that's a really important thing. And it's giving yourself permission. And it's like, do you love your kids enough to love yourself enough to figure out ways of interacting with and facing the challenge, right? You want to be a mom, you want to love your children, that's a really wonderful thing. But you also want to be able to enjoy time away from your kids. You want to be able to enjoy having children that are off in the world, off to being people, because they're your kids, but they're also people. And you want them out there in the world doing wonderful things, meeting new people, having new experiences. And I think you deserve to be able to enjoy that, because that's what being kind of a good mom is, in a sense, is that you're preparing these little people to go out there and do great stuff. And at the end of the day, you should be able to have fun knowing that they're out there, to feel good about the fact that they're out there, and not, drive yourself crazy. Worrying about all the bad things that could happen to them. But there's a lot of wonderful things that could happen to them out there too. And if you were thinking about those things instead, and that's truly like building up that pattern. So very often for me, it's like one of these things that, like, at the end of the day, and I use this more with myself than with other people because it sounds kind of harsh until you really understand what it means, and then it's like, oh, that actually kind of makes sense. The only reason anyone ever thinks about anything is because they don't have anything better to think about. And that's true when what you're thinking about is good, and it's true when what you're thinking about is crap, and it's true when what you're thinking about is just kind of like mellow, vanilla, mediocre, whatever. The only reason I ever think anything, the only reason I ever complain about anything is because I didn't have access in that moment to something better. Okay, well, how do you give yourself access to something better? I think you deliberately and you consciously and you intentionally start thinking about new and better things. And so instead of worrying about your kids, imagine, like you said, wonderful things happening to them. It's hard to worry about your kids while you're also imagining them doing great things. I imagine them going out. I imagine them having a wonderful time. I imagine them making choices consciously. I imagine them learning how to exist in this world, not some idealized world, but actually this world, and being around other people who are irresponsible. And I imagine them responding resourcefully to that. And I imagine them feeling really good. I imagine them doing the things I want them to do. And when you're really deliberately doing that, if you're just scrolling through TV or whatever, it's easy. I mean, we've all done this, right? And we do this sometimes even now. You kind of just become a feather in the wind, and sometimes the wrong wind catches you and you blow in a direction that you don't want to go. I mean, it's like you have a sailboat. Sometimes you stop paying attention to where you're going and the wind just kind of blows you wherever, but when you're paying attention to it, you can kind of go with it and control the direction of where you're going. And I think when you recognize that, what happens is this beautiful thing occurs where you recognize that when you're feeling worried about your kids, it's because you haven't been tending to your focus. You've been investing your mental money somewhere that's giving you emotional dividends that you don't want. And as soon as you become convinced of the fact that worried sensation that you're having, it's not because there's something terrible happening to your kids, it's because you're not tending to your focus, you then just say, oh, I gotta clean this thing up real quick. Let me think about some wonderful things. Do I want to think about wonderful things with my kids, or do I just want to think about wonderful things on a different subject? What do I want to do? Well, then you'll start feeling really good, and then they'll be back, and you'll say, I was just starting to have a good time. You know what I mean? You're back already. And I think that's an important thing. You know, it's that, like, give yourself permission to be as good at this as you are right now and not better. That's really important. Give yourself permission to love your kids without worrying about them all the time. Recognize that those things are totally unrelated, that there's no amount of love for a person that requires you to do things that don't serve you, to feel bad. I love you so much I have to feel bad. I mean, that's one of those things that a lot of people who do really not so great stuff, people who are sometimes emotionally controlling or abusive, right? They genuinely feel that the reason they're doing that stuff is because I love you so much, I have to do these, even though I know this is oppressing you, I have to do these things because I love you so much. And I think recognizing that the amount of attachment and love that we have for a person isn't really connected to what we're thinking about or how we're, like, there's no amount of love that requires me to do what doesn't serve me, and there's no amount of love that you can have for someone that requires you to do that which doesn't serve you. It can be easy, it can be tempting if you've got a tendency or a pattern built in. There are certain things that push you into that point where it's a very easy thing to do. If you want to improve what it's like to be you, I think that there are ways to learn how to kind of redirect that thing. And once you recognize that, as soon as you can make sense out of it, you'll do it. I mean, that's sort of the bottom line, isn't it? That there is a way to create that experience. In a very general sense, I don't know if we've covered this already or not, but I love the idea that it's always possible to create a different experience than the one I've had up until this point. And very often, I think, like, if you're like a hardcore worrier, like you worry about your kids, like you're like the Olympics of worrying, rather than trying not to worry about them, this is such a deeply ingrained pattern. I think it would probably be a better idea to start, just let yourself, because you're going to worry anyway, right? If you try to stop doing this thing, it's going to crush you like a ton of bricks. It's like, forget it. You think one, I'm not going to worry thought, like 10,000 are going to kind of pounce on it just to get things back to normal. Go ahead and do the worrying, but just kind of watch yourself as you worry. Watch how you do it. Become familiar with, identify the source of this worrying emotion and see if it's not coming from things that you're thinking. Let yourself think those things. You don't have to try to stop. Just watch and consider as you're having that experience, not holding back now. Go ahead and worry. Go ahead and feel that stuff 100%. Consider the possibility that in that moment, in time, in this very moment, I could be feeling and experiencing something completely different than what I'm feeling and experiencing right now. I could be totally at ease, and I could be totally at peace. It's possible for me to be totally at ease and totally at peace right here and right now, and to love my kids every bit as much as I do, and for my kids to be fine. All of those things are possible. Isn't that interesting? That's interesting. And you keep on worrying. Don't stop worrying. But the whole time, just keep reminding yourself, I don't have to be feeling this way. It's fine that I'm feeling this way right now. The fact that I'm feeling this way right now doesn't mean I'm stupid, doesn't mean I'm neurotic, doesn't mean I'm a bad person, it doesn't mean I'm always going to have to worry this way. Really, it doesn't mean anything except for the fact that I'm thinking in ways that are causing me to have the experience that I'm having right now. And that's totally fine. Because if you start worrying about worry, you just pile meta-worry on top of it, and you resist all of it, and you feel bad about all of that, and then you suffer about all of that. And that's too much work. It's too much, not worth it. So you just let yourself worry, just kind of watch that whole thing, and it'll start to kind of unravel itself. It'll start to just kind of like loosen up, and you'll start to realize that it's your doing. You'll start to realize that it's coming from you, and you'll let that be okay, because you're a master of letting everything be okay, and you'll just respond resourcefully to the reality of the fact that you're causing yourself to create experiences that you don't want. And you'll say, okay, given that, what do I want now? And that's really great, because that's populating your personal history with an experiential reference point for responding resourcefully to doing something that's not that resourceful. And there's nothing more valuable than that. You see how good you're doing all the time. So much of this stuff really is about getting good at recognizing how good you already are, so that you can relax a little bit and allow yourself to get even better. I mean, like, that's what this whole point of life is all about. It's such a beautiful and perfect thing. When you recognize that, you just kind of like ease into it, and you notice that things just tend to perpetually improve when you let them.
Yeah, and you've really just got to think about it on all of these different levels about communication to your body. So like on the GNM level, and understanding what this communication is, this worry, especially if you have a diagnosis of some sort, especially if it's a nest worry conflict that you just continually are reactivating. It's a communication. You've got to think about it on the level that this is communicating something to my body about a danger. And so as soon as you've got danger in your sights, as soon as you've got danger on your mind, your body's getting the signals of danger, danger, danger. And if it's a sudden shock, if it's something that caught you off guard, or if it's something that has been a conflict for you in the past, your awareness and your ability to utilize these tools is so powerful, because it's ceasing that communication. It's giving you a way to think about things that allows you to feel good and allows you to relax and allows you to feel, because that's the thing, is when you feel so convinced that this is the responsible and right and good thing to do is to worry, that it's almost impossible to not worry if you really do, like we've talked about. If you think love means worry, if you think love means concern, and there's no other way to think about it, you're going to do this thing that is not serving you emotionally, just kind of on the, how you're feeling in this moment. But then you've got to look at that big picture of like, what is this communicating to my tissues? What is this communicating to my body? If I'm trying to heal something, fear and panic and worry is not helping the situation. In fact, it's sending more messages of we are not okay, we are not safe, we must adapt. And so just that awareness, like in the moment, when these things are going on, what do you have access to in those moments? Because the sooner you're aware of it, and if you don't let it go on for a very long time, most of the conflicts that we experience, you never really see a huge manifestation. You have them, you see a bigger picture, you're able to have a new perception, and you get over it. But it's these things that really just kind of are really hard to shake. That are really hard, they really are deeply ingrained, whatever that trauma was. When you are looking for tracks and triggers, a lot of people have posted in the group that are like, yeah, I know that I've got triggers. I know that there are things that happen that put me right back in that place. There are things that happen that remind me, and then basically it's an invitation to go back down that road you were on when you had the trauma to begin with, and you kind of relive it, and you re-experience it, and you think about it in a certain way, and you tell things to yourself, and you kind of repeat this story, and you feel those feelings all over again. And that's what keeps you from fully healing. That's called a hanging healing, where you kind of make some progress, you've pretty much resolved it, but then something happens, something reminds you of that initial conflict, and then you're getting into healing, you're experiencing some of the healing symptoms, but then healing stops and conflict activity begins again. And so you can stay in that cycle for such a long time, and that's where you feel like you've got this chronic issue and it never seems to go away, and you're wondering, why is it taking so long to heal? Shouldn't this have happened? Shouldn't this have healed already? But that awareness of like, this is, I realize how I'm keeping this thing alive. And that's why you've got to realize what the components, the anatomy of your conflict is, what's keeping it alive, and what thoughts, what meanings are you telling yourself, what stories are you telling yourself that keep that conflict as it is. And so, this is a big one.
And I think the thing too is seeing yourself do it while you do it. And so, I know how I'm keeping this alive when you're sitting comfortably having coffee and you're talking with your friends, like, that's how I do that. That's one thing. It's quite another thing to see yourself say to yourself something, or to initiate some kind of, I think of it almost like these we talk about like the triggers, like computer hotkeys. Like you push like Control R or whatever, and it launches the program. It's kind of like that almost, right? It's like that experience and your immediate instantaneous response launches this program instantly. And what you want to do is you want to deprogram that hotkey. I've had some hotkeys on my computer keyboard in the past that were so annoying because I would hit them by accident and launch programs I didn't want. And that to me is like kind of like what having the trigger is. Like you keep launching this program, and it's like no, I don't want that one anymore. But once it's launched, it's launched. The app is running. The program is underway. The thing is to watch yourself doing it as you are doing it. To watch yourself say, because when I say something negative to myself and I buy it, right? So I pitch it to myself. I say, hey, Steve, want to worry about what so-and-so thinks about what you said the other day? And then I go, well, okay, yeah, sure. That I had that feeling response, right? I pitch and I buy. At that point, I say to myself, I watch that and I say, here we go. This is doing anxiety. So I'm going to feel a certain way, and say, oh yeah, there's that feeling. It's weird. You kind of have to you build a second spot, and you watch it as it's happening, and you say, oh, yep, I'm running this program here. What happens is that you can build a new experience of the same old feeling, because you introduce awareness into it. So instead of just negative thought, unpleasant emotion, there's negative thought, unpleasant emotion, and then back behind it, looking at it, is an awareness of the fact that it's all you're doing. That's a new experience, right? Because your experience is all of that stuff. It's the negative thought, it's the bad feeling, and it's that watcher saying, the reason that negative feeling is happening is because of that negative thought. When I say this to myself, I tend to feel this way. Oh, that's learning something. That's interesting. It's like I discovered when I was young, is that like when I'm trying to think of something, when I touched like the hot stove, it hurt, and as soon as I learned that, my inclination to touch the hot stove decreased radically. that's a physical thing. It's very obvious. With the stuff that goes on in your mind, it's a little bit easier to miss some of that stuff. But we've been touching mental hot stoves our whole life. I mean, some of us have had our hand down on the hot stove in our mind for 50 years because it's so easy to miss, because it's not obvious, because it doesn't seem like something we're doing. It seems like something that's happening to us. And the rule about that is that when you're doing something but you don't know you're doing it because it just seems like it's happening to you, that's when the whole of who you are, some aspect other than the conscious aspect of yourself, is doing stuff that you don't know about. And it's not that you can't know about it, it's just that you don't, because we're looking out here, we're paying attention to what's going on in the world outside. We tend to neglect kind of the world that's going on inside here. And so the we that we experience ourselves to be is kind of like, I think of us as like looking out the window of our eyeballs. So we're like, pressed right up against the window of our eyeballs, looking out into the world. Meanwhile, the whole of who we are, way back in the bag, is running all these programs that may or may not be serving us. Once in a while, it does us some good to turn away from the window of our eyeball. So you kind of look inward, right? So sometimes I imagine this, like my eyes turning around and looking back inside my head and seeing what's going on back there. Who is that voice that's always saying that crappy stuff to me? Who is that? Like, let me get a look at you real quick. Let me figure out about this pattern and that pattern. Let me begin to kind of understand the components, the constituent parts of my experience, recognizing that most of what your experience is occurring as a result of stuff that's going on inside your head. It's a very powerful thing, but it's empowering because you recognize nothing better. There's nothing better. Is there anything better than having a negative experience and then having the responsibility experience of realizing that it's all coming from you, to have some kind of existential angst, some kind of deep, oh my God, I might not be good enough. Oh my God, I might not be able to make it. Oh my God, good things I might be one of those people for whom nothing ever works out. Oh, I might end up like so-and-so. Oh my God, it's all so terrible. And then to become aware suddenly and in a flash that entire experience of existential it's all coming from you right here and right now. It's not telling you about what's going to be true. It's telling you about what you're doing right here and right now. Oh, the way I'm doing consciousness right now is creating this experience. That's what that is. That this experience is feedback not on what's going to happen, it's feedback on what's happening right here and right now. I'm focusing my mind on what I don't want. Is it normal to feel bad when I focus my mind on what I don't want? Oh yeah, it is. So does that mean that there's anything wrong with me? Is there something wrong with me, that I'm anxious or depressed or worried or angry or frustrated or feeling unworthy? No, there's not, because that's just what everyone feels when they focus their mind on what they don't want. Some people, it's anger, some people it's sadness, some people it's whatever. That's perfectly normal. You're a computer, right, in a sense, that's running a program properly. It's just the program you're running is not one that you want to be running, and so you got to put another one on. You got to run a different program instead. I think when you recognize that, it's just like, man, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm just doing some stuff that doesn't serve me. Mm-hmm. And the nice thing about doings, the nice thing when experience is doing, is that when you don't like the experience, you just do a different experience instead. Because I don't think you can really stop doing anything. I think you just start doing other things instead. I don't think stopping's not an action. I mean, how do you start stopping? You can't start stopping, right? You just start. You know what I mean? You start something new. You start something different. You start something incompatible. And so, yeah,
that's what I love. Is just it's like the opposite of worry. Worry is negative imagination. Do some positive imagination. Think about what you do want to have happen for whoever it is that you're concerned about. Because that literally is what it did for me that night where I was just, I don't know if you remember, I just got so worked up and so worried just out of nowhere for all of my family members, and I felt terrible. But when I came online, when I realized I was doing that, I was like, oh, okay, that's why would I go down that road? That doesn't feel that's my hand on the hot stove. That's me doing something that feels really bad. But then there's a part of me that says, but what if it's true? What if this is intuition?
That's a thought too. That's what you got to recognize, is that's a thought too. That most recent thing that you said to yourself. That's a thought too. Am I going to buy that one? Okay, I'm worrying. I'm thinking about so-and-so being upset with me. I'm thinking about something bad happening to my family and I'm feeling bad. And then I say, oh no, those are just thoughts. I don't want to go down that road. And then I say to myself, oh, but what if it's true? That's a thought too. See, that's the thing, is that we keep wanting to say it's like negative thought, thought that says, what if all those thoughts are true? That's just another thought in the line. It's just, and it's a sense like our experience is as good as our last thought. And if my last thought is, what if all those negative thoughts are really true? It's like, well, those negative thoughts are negative thoughts. Those negative thoughts don't feel good. Make yourself the measure of all things, and throw that stuff out. Just throw it out. You got to be quality control here. And it's like, the only metric for evaluating these thoughts and whether or not they're worth thinking is what's the impact that this thought has on the quality of what it's like to be me. And, does it have a positive impact on what it's like to be me? No, it doesn't. Let's throw it out. Oh, but what if it's true? No, it doesn't matter. It's not having a positive impact on what it's like to be you. That's the bare minimum, baseline, deal-breaking, necessary prerequisite for it being a thought worth thinking. It's not enriching what it's like to be you. Throw it out. If it's a subject that's important to you, try again. Let the assembly line send something else down. It's got to improve what it's like to be you. If it's worth thinking about, it's worth thinking about in a way that feels good to you. There's got to be a way, right? Mm-hmm. And if it's really that important, let the other than conscious aspects of yourself package it in a way that's more empowering, more resourceful, better feeling. I'm not going to accept this quality of thought anymore. I promise you, when you start throwing that stuff out, your mind will increase the quality of the thoughts that it's offering up to you. Mm-hmm. It's just that what it's done so far has been good enough. And that's, it's like you have to put a little pressure on yourself to come up with new and better stuff. And it's a gentle pressure. It's just, no, not going to buy it, not going to buy it, not going to buy it. And like, shit, I guess we got to up the quality of some of these thoughts here. And they just start getting better. Mm-hmm. And that was that thing for me, is like I wanted to have the bank or the well from which I was drawing my thoughts and feelings be better. I didn't want to spend my whole life sifting through crap thoughts looking for one positive one so I could think it. I want to increase the offering over time. I want the average quality thought to increase, and that's exactly what happens when you just throw it. Sometimes you got to throw out 10,000 thoughts in a row, and that's perfectly okay. I think when you allow yourself to say nope, and it's almost like, I don't know, like Deal or No Deal or something like that, where like your unconscious mind keeps saying, okay, well, we take this one, and you pick it up and you're like, no, I don't really like that one either, and you just keep throwing them out. Eventually it will fold. Eventually there will be this critical mass. And the interesting thing is, every time you think to yourself, no, that thought's not quite good enough for me, you know that you're already actually thinking a thought worth thinking. That's the tricky thing, is that when you say to yourself, that thought's not worthy of my mental money, I'm not going to buy that one because it's not worth it, I don't want it. That is a resourceful thought too. It's hard to keep up with this stuff, mm-hmm. right? Because it's the leading edge of thinking.
Yeah, and so as soon as that part of you becomes aware, because that's really our whole entire process is all about awareness. It truly is. It's like, it's the cure-all for all of these things, these issues. It's like when you are able to come on, like get with it, and you're like, oh, okay, here I am. I know now. I notice myself worrying, and you don't beat yourself up for the fact you're worrying. You just you become aware. And in that moment, if like all you can do is just watch, just keep watching. I mean, that's really like that. Watching is everything. Watching yourself do it. But then when you start being able to tinker and play with new and different thoughts, and that's really what we like to do, is offer up some thoughts for you, then you start changing the direction, and you say, oh, I'm going to imagine lovingly, I'm going to imagine wonderful things happening, I'm just going to imagine these great things happening, and I'm going to fall asleep thinking about that instead of thinking about all these terrible things that could happen. That is such a powerful thing to start doing, and you can start doing that at any point. When you be at any point in this process, when you become aware, that's what it is. It's just like, okay, let's get the light bulb going, because we live our lives on autopilot for the most part. Most people totally, completely just on autopilot. They're not consciously, intentionally building their life out of what they want it to be made out of. It just is kind of by default. And my life was by default for 25 years. And the process of becoming aware of the water that I'm swimming in, becoming aware of my conscious process was, it took a while, and it took a lot of trial and error, and a lot of like, okay, here I'm still doing the same thing. But the more you watch, like, you will get to that point where you're able to direct the flow, where you really are consciously creating this life that you love. And that's what all of our work is about. So,
and if you catch yourself doing the same thing, the same behavior, oh, I'm worrying again, the same feeling, the same pattern of behavior, oh, I'm nagging them again, oh, I'm being mean again, or whatever. It's fine to keep doing the same thing as long as you do something different in response to doing the same thing. Don't you see? There's always a new opportunity. So if you're doing the same thing you've always done, if you wasted another Sunday on the couch when you feel like you should have been doing something else and you feel like you've wasted your time, well, if you always beat yourself up, do something different. Do something other than beat yourself up this time, because there's always a chance to do something different, because these cycles repeat and you never step out of them. And there's this feeling that you do at some point step out of them, but you can do the same thing over and over again. Just do something different in response to the fact that you did the same thing over and over again. I had to do something different back when I used to eat 24 cookies, vegan chocolate chip cookies from Whole Foods, right? Not because I was trying to be healthy, but because they were just the most delicious brand or variety that they had. I said, oh, I gotta stop doing this. Every single time I was like, oh, I feel so sick. This is just too much, right? And eventually I started to say that to myself, and then I said, no, wait a minute. I'm going to actually deliberately avoid saying to myself, oh, I got to stop doing this, because it seems to me as if that might be an essential part of my doing it again later. That there's this invisible thread that flows from my saying to myself, oh, I got to stop doing this, and it projects forward to the next time I do this again. Because I've literally, every single time I've eaten all these cookies, I've sort of like leaned back in my chair in this kind of like comatose state and said, oh, I have to stop doing this. I was like, I wonder what would happen if I actually didn't say that to myself. And so, when I didn't say that, is that big of a deal? Oh, no. But when I didn't say that, I kind of didn't move to my next step, and I didn't move to that next. It's like you leave one ingredient out, or you do one, you fail to do one essential thing in your self-sabotage strategy, the whole thing falls apart. And I think when you just recognize that, it's like and very often the point at which we become aware, the point at which the average person, or the person who hasn't done a lot of awareness work, tends to become aware, is the point at which the damage has been done, the bad behavior has been engaged in, the pattern of worry has already occurred. Then you come online and you say, oh God, here I am, I've done it again, oh, I feel so bad, and all that stuff. So that's the reason that it's so important to kind of, do a forgiveness thing with yourself, or be compassionate with yourself, or say, fuck that, I'm not gonna beat myself up about that. I mean, I messed up by doing the thing, but I'm not gonna mess up by feeling bad about doing the thing. Steve said I can do all the things that I want, as long as I'm just not allowed to feel bad about it. I can make any mistake I want, I'm just not allowed to feel bad about it, because that's the point for most people where it's easiest to tap into this process. And if you can give up the guilt, you can usually with pretty quickly give up the thing that you're feeling guilty about, because the guilt and the negative emotion associated with it, and the patterns of wanting to go unconscious, wanting to escape your experience that go along with feeling something as uselessly bad as guilt, are an essential driving force to you repeating that behavior at some point in the future. And it's just a funny thing. It's like when you pull the plug on that, you disrupt that whole pattern. You disrupt that whole cycle. I mean, this is like one of those things. Is it right? You ever have really good patterns going, really good habits down? You're on a really good roll, and then the slightest little thing happens, and you don't do. Like, I know for me, like my exercise routine, my productivity routines can completely go off the rails if I miss one essential part of my ritual. I do this, then I do this, then I do this, then I do this, and then this. And if like step 2 is missing, then it just kind of peters out. Like I just never get to step 3. Like it just doesn't happen. The bad stuff that we do, or the unresourceful stuff that doesn't improve what it's like to be us, that stuff is just as vulnerable too. And if you can pull the right pin or the right thread, it's like a sweater, the whole thing will just kind of unravel. But you got to be paying attention in order to do that. And in order to pay attention, you can't be beating yourself up, because you can't beat yourself up and watch yourself at the same time. You can't watch what you're doing with detached curiosity and be playing the mean parent or teacher or castigator to yourself at the same time. You just can't do both of those things. You cannot resist the fact that you are as you are and get better at the same time. You can't beat yourself up for who you are and become who you want to be at the same time. There's a choice that has to be made between those two things. And when you choose consciously, what do? You always choose what serves you. And but it's like it's a funny feeling to give that up, because we're talking about treating yourself nicely in that moment in time when you feel the least worthy of nice treatment. That's when you need it the most. That's when it stands to benefit you the most. Not because it's going to heal some kind of deep wounds, but because it's going to position you to see things that you need to see in order to create the experiential changes within yourself that will allow you to produce a different pattern of behavior in the future that you can then feel wonderful about. That's the thing, is when you've done something that doesn't serve you, what thought can we think, what feeling can we feel that will maximize the probability of you then going forward and doing something wonderful that you can feel wonderful about later? It's never beating yourself up. It just never is. If it were, we would say. If it were, I would write a book called How to Beat Yourself Up. Kick your own ass, and you'll create the life you want. Would I write that book if that was how it worked?
Yeah, sure.
I absolutely would write that book. But it just doesn't work. I tried it with myself. I watched other people try it. I watched you try it. I've never encountered anybody, right? But it's such a difficult habit to give up, because we just feel so right just to pummel ourselves, right, for doing the wrong thing when we've done the wrong thing. But if you'll just kind of say, let's try again. Those are the people who win the game. It's like, Michael Jordan, I remember Space Jam, right? It's like that, remember young Michael Jordan who was out there I think it was Space Jam. It was like young Michael Jordan who's out there shooting those baskets, or maybe it was like Michael Jordan biography movie or something. He's out there all night long shooting baskets, and his dad's like, do a few more and you can come in or whatever. And, every time he misses, he had to do like a certain number of consecutive shots in, I think, or something like that. I knew nothing about basketball, basically. But the idea was he had to do it right a certain number of times, and then he could come in. Now, when he did it wrong, he didn't beat himself up about it. It just meant he was going to try to do it right 100 times in a row. And I think that it's just when it comes to thinking, when it comes to feeling, when it comes to behaving, when it comes to perceiving, when it comes to responding to reality, making a mistake is not a problem. You don't get minus points for making mistakes. You don't get minus points for worrying. You don't get minus points for feeling bad. It's a sum total game. How many resourceful thoughts can we accumulate? How much positive experience can we accumulate? How much of what you want can you cram into this interval of consciousness called your life? And when you recognize that, and when you understand the scoring system, you know what I mean? You understand the scoring system. If you're 75 years old and you've done nothing but worry your whole life, does that mean it makes more sense or less sense to start enjoying yourself as much as you can, but from now and the end of this interval of consciousness? I mean, it's feeling better more of the time. No matter how old you are or how young you are, there's time to do what you want to do, and there's just zero fucking time to do anything you don't want to do. And when you recognize that, and you just say, that's the thing, that my thing is improving the quality of what it's like to be me. And it doesn't matter how good of a job I've done up until this point, because improvement is the secret to happiness. Perpetual improvement is the secret, and you're always good enough to get better. That's it. Like, how's that? I love it, because for me, it's a bullshit short circuiter. It's like an excuse short circuiter. It's like, I got nothing to do now except find ways to feel better. Mm-hmm. And when that's all that you have to do, it's good enough, and you do that, and you feel better, and then you're able to do better from there, and you feel even better about that, and it's just this kind of perpetual upward cycle.
Yeah, so I hope you guys got plenty of thoughts to think about, and give yourself reasons to stop worrying, or to worry less, or worry in a new way, worry with a sense of awareness, and worry with that knowledge of knowing what this is communicating to your body, and realizing how, in order to access all of your resources, worrying may not be the best option. So, I hope you guys really enjoyed this, and have a great week, and we'll see you again soon.
Yeah, thanks. See you soon.